The Spin-Off Podcast Network.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spin-Off's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by Spark Lab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about Spark Lab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
Listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by The Spin-Off with help from Callaghan Innovation. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
Much of what we talk about in entrepreneurship in New Zealand comes to us from Silicon Valley. Whether it's the lean agile, the Series A, the seed round, the terms and actions come out of that place. So it makes a lot of sense that AUT, for their inaugural Entrepreneur in Residence, have brought to New Zealand a 30-year veteran and key figure in the Valley. You might have heard of some of the firms he has founded, been on the board of, or invested in. Pandora Internet Radio is one of the better-known consumer brands, but there were a raft of other companies that pushed forward technology. He also set up Garage Ventures with Guy Kawasaki, the best-selling author of Apple Macintosh fame, who popularised their work together. Bill Reichert is in town for a series of events with AUT, and we've been lucky enough to grab him today to talk about the Valley, VC, and entrepreneurship. Thank you very much for coming on the show today, Bill.
Mm-hmm. Hey, thank you, Simon. Great to be here. Great to be in New Zealand.
Hey, so tell me a little bit about the early career. I see on your resume there's McKinsey & Co., Harvard and Stanford. So a real kind of establishment kind of first path to business. What led you to Silicon Valley?
Well, what got me to Silicon Valley was the East Coast weather. Basically, and after I graduated from Harvard, a buddy and I, we got a panel van and we drove west until we hit the water. And I thought, wow, this California thing, that's pretty nice. And so that was when I sort of accidentally found McKinsey and wound up jumping into McKinsey, and I became one of their research analysts focused on doing the analytics for mergers and acquisitions in the LA office. And so way back then, I was the guy running the spreadsheets for mergers and acquisitions, and in that era, I was actually using mini computers and timeshare computers. And so that got me to California, and then I thought, wow, why would I go back east? And so I went to Stanford for graduate school. And while I was at Stanford, I knew the PC was coming out, and I made a comment to a VC that I happened to know that there was no decent software for the PC. And he said, well, then why don't you start a company? And that was nowhere on my plans. I was figuring I was going to have to bite the bullet, go back east, be establishment East Coast kind of person. And then I had this opportunity, and a buddy and I, we kind of put together this idea for creating an app development company for the PC. And the VC just said, great, here's $600,000. I thought, boy, this entrepreneur VC thing is not that hard. I don't know why everybody's talking about it. But, it's a little bit more the exception than the rule. But so I was extremely lucky in that. Though, as it turned out, that company, it actually took off spectacularly. It was amazing. It was just glorious. And then we went just a little bit too far. We kind of overpromised and underdelivered for one of our clients. And we hit a wall, we crashed, we burned, flamed out. It was horrific. And at that point, I had just proposed to my then fiance, and I turned to her and I said, I think I've just lost more money than I'm ever going to make in my life. And so the good news is she actually married me anyway. And the other good news is the great thing about Silicon Valley is when you crash and burn in Silicon Valley, you just pick yourself up and you dust yourself off, and then you kind of spin the story a little bit, and then you do it again.
Yeah.
So I did it 3 more times. My second company, we took public. So that was great. I figured, I got this entrepreneurship thing down. And so I took my winnings and went into a third company, which was this unbelievable eye-watering technology that we managed to drive into a brick wall at about 500 miles an hour. So I learned a little humility. And fortunately, I got another chance to do it again. And we took that company public, and I decided, okay, that's good. That's great. I've done this entrepreneurship thing. And got together then with Guy Kawasaki and a few other people, and we started Garage Technology Ventures, with the idea of creating a different kind of venture firm. And our big idea back then was we wanted to create the first venture capital firm that was designed for the benefit of entrepreneurs. We thought that was a cheeky way of putting it.
after having been up and down the famous roads to ask for cash.
Exactly.
And maybe it wasn't for the benefit of the entrepreneur.
Exactly. So yes, I had been, through the process as an entrepreneur and we all felt that it was a closed system. It was kind of an old boys network back then. It's still somewhat closed to most entrepreneurs.
Sorry, but that's 98, is it? That you kind of Garage.
Exactly. That's when we got together and launched Garage.
If we could wind it back a little bit earlier, back to just into a couple of those early runs first. I mean, you said very kind of modestly, it happened, we got 600,000 and it was easy. But I mean, to be there at the birth of the PC and to have known the value of it, because there's those famous quotes like the boss of IBM saying, no one's going to need a computer in every room, or whatever they are.
Right.
To have been in the right place and actually seen that was going to be an explosion. What was it like in the Valley in those days, and was that an easy thing to know?
It was a pretty easy thing to know at the time, because you're in the middle of a culture that really, really wants a computer. And, so once you've had a taste of computing, you just can't get enough of it in terms of what you can do with a computer if you haven't had a computer before. And so it was not really, the famous story about, we only need 5 computers or whatever. That was at that point, everybody I knew wanted a computer, right? So, and we realized the value of computing at McKinsey. I mean, it was really painful. We had an Apple II at McKinsey, and it was useless, for doing any business computing. And so everybody knew that you desperately needed this PC to do any serious business. And so that was the sort of obvious thing that was sitting there. Now, having said that, most every entrepreneur will tell you when they had their epiphany about their big idea, to them it was, of course, obvious. And it's not always obvious to everyone around them. So it's hard for me to unwind my brain and suggest that it wasn't obvious to everyone, but obviously it was to the VC when he heard me say, "Gee, there's no good business computing software for the PC." He kind of said, "Boy, I guess he's right. And if we don't do it, then who's going to do it?" So. And he said, why don't you do it?
That's amazing. And coming at this from, not being American and not having spent time in Silicon Valley until very recently, the last kind of 5 years. In my head, I see it as being a little bit kind of rock and roll and a little bit shambolic and a little bit exciting, kind of like Halt and Catch Fire or something. Is that accurate? Are these pop culture kind of things that we get accurate?
Well, yes and no. It is. It's insanely chaotic in the sense that every cafe, every unused space gets turned into a co-working space. Everybody's talking entrepreneurship, startups, new technology. And it's very interesting, depending on which restaurant you're in. If you're down in Santa Clara, they're talking about semiconductors. If you're up in San Francisco, they're talking about apps. But everybody's talking technology. And that is something that you've noticed that's wildly different than anywhere else on the planet. The entire culture of Silicon Valley is about the next big thing. It's all about sort of the next cool technology and how we can use it and how we can do it and how we can get out ahead of everybody else. So that is very much the vibe in Silicon Valley, and it's really rare anyplace else on the planet that you get that intensity of that focus of everybody on that topic.
Yeah, it kind of felt, I only went for the first time about 5 years ago, and there were billboards up for things that I thought were pretty
obscure.
Pretty obscure. And there's billboards up for New Relic, and like, oh wow, that's but pretty interesting. And as you say, everyone has an app. Like, how important is it, or an app idea? Like it's the place where your Uber driver pitches you just to practice their spiel. How important is it to go there and be at the centre of it? Because one of the things you're doing here is you're in New Zealand as an entrepreneur in residence for AUT, sharing some of that experience.
Right.
How much of it is it about physically being there, though?
Well, you don't have to physically be there in order to be a successful entrepreneur, and that's proven all over the planet, obviously. But because Silicon Valley is so iconic in the entrepreneur high-tech space, I really do encourage entrepreneurs to get there and to have that experience, mainly because it will settle them down in terms of the perception that the streets are paved with gold, and all these college graduates are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars after one pitch of their idea, and everybody's starting up a startup. It is most entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley are struggling the same way that most entrepreneurs around the planet are struggling, because it's so competitive out there. And so it will give, I think, Kiwi entrepreneurs a little bit of perspective to realize that it's not that easy even in Silicon Valley. The other perspective that they need is that not every Silicon Valley entrepreneur is on this amazing inside track, and that somehow New Zealand is off in the distance and we're on the outside track. Everybody has more or less the same challenge of getting the attention of somebody who can fund them. The big difference, as I was telling some entrepreneurs the other night, the big difference between Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and Kiwi entrepreneurs is the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, they know all the lingo, they know all the names to drop, they know kind of how to sound like they're kind of with it and in it. And unfortunately, Kiwi entrepreneurs, they show up and they kind of feel like visitors and outsiders, and that just shows. Silicon Valley, we love visitors and we're nice to visitors and we embrace the visitors and we talk with visitors, but we don't fund visitors. And so, the challenge for a Kiwi entrepreneur coming to Silicon Valley is to show up as if you are part of the community, not as if you were a visitor.
That's fascinating that you say we don't fund visitors, as that's something that we do hear from Kiwi entrepreneurs, that they've had more luck with the kind of external arms of big venture capital firms than the locals. And on your Garage website, it says that you fund people in the geography of Western California. Like you're that specific.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why that specific?
Because when you're starting up a company, there's just a lot of things that can and do go wrong. And so every startup company has a series of crises they have to work through. And so investors like us who like to be actively involved with our companies, we're active investors, we take board seats and whatever, in order to stay in touch with what's going on and to be helpful, there has to be some degree of proximity. And so our rule is generally, we want a board meeting to be a one-day turnaround flight if we can do that. So now, having said that, we've invested in companies out of Israel and out of Boston and Chicago and Austin. We have invested beyond our geography. But we, in all those cases, we want some partner in the investment or we want some close relationship with the entrepreneur, because you need to have that open communication link. You need to have that active relationship in order to be effective in knowing what's going on and how to help and, what to do next.
Let's look a little bit at your investment fund. So Garage, which you started in 1998 with Guy Kawasaki, who is a very well-known person for being attached to a number of things that your company has done with him, which is the art of the start and that whole conference around getting people going.
Exactly.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that kind of... How did it go for you launching to be an entrepreneur-focused VC fund, and have other people tried to catch up?
Yeah, so as I said, we wanted to be focused on helping entrepreneurs, and so we wanted to be the most outreach-oriented venture fund out there and share all of our experiences, all of our scars and our mistakes and our failures, as well as our successes and what worked. And so we launched Garage on the back of one of Guy's books, Rules for Revolutionaries. And we put in place from day one and sort of what you would call event marketing, which was actually outreach and education for entrepreneurs. And originally we called it Boot Camp for Startups. So we launched this 2-day conference called Boot Camp for Startups. And actually it was after 9/11, we decided to change the name from Boot Camp to Art of the Start. It was, for a whole bunch of somewhat obvious reasons. The vibe was better with Art of the Start. But the idea was to pull entrepreneurs together from wherever they were and give them access to these panelists. We would bring in all of our buddies, all of our VC buddies and our other entrepreneur buddies and some of our service provider buddies and corporate buddies, to give entrepreneurs face-to-face access to the people who were on the, sort of on the inside in the community, and do what I was saying before, give them a reality check around what works and what doesn't work, and hey, I'm not that much different from all these other people around me, to hopefully boost their confidence and clarify their journey. So we took all those learnings from the first several years of Garage, and Guy spun them up into The Art of the Start, the book. And that wound up being sort of an even better outreach program for us to reach out globally to the entrepreneur community.
The name of the company, Garage, which... Yes. I imagine is about kind of that kind of foundation myth that you find in a lot of your Apple, your Microsoft, and also in New Zealand we have the same foundation myth for the entrepreneur or the innovator, or it was here until recently the inventor in the garage.
Yes.
How important is that, and do you see those kind of commonalities between New Zealand and that Silicon Valley way of thinking?
Well, I think the commonality is common to the entrepreneur mindset, which is to be a problem solver and to be scrappy. So that's always been kind of what we saw as the characteristics of the best entrepreneurs. But yes, the Garage is famous in Silicon Valley for actually the foundational location of Hewlett-Packard. So Hewlett-Packard started out in a garage in Palo Alto, and that was our logo. There, a photo of that garage was our logo initially, and then we got a note from Carly Fiorina, who was the CEO at the time, and she said, your logo, and so we had to make it a more abstract garage instead. But yes, as a foundational myth of the scrappy entrepreneur who isn't wasting money on, sort of their fancy surroundings. Instead, they're focused on, building something that's going to change the world.
And do you see? I mean, you've been here for a little while now, and you've got a little while to go. And you decided to come down here, which is not a trivial thing from lovely, warm California. Like, have you found that here? Do you see that here?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it is interesting. You know, the big overlap is that, that Kiwis are known to be good problem solvers. And, there is this sort of cultural heritage here of, the number 8 wire, and we can do with and make, things work without having necessarily all the money in the world to go buy the stuff that we want to buy. So that scrappy problem-solving mentality seems to be a core part of the sort of Kiwi culture. So now the world has changed a lot since then, and now you have these all of these programs now around the world, including here, where you've got these very nice co-working spaces, and you've got all this nice support, and which is brilliant. I mean, it's a brilliant thing for entrepreneurs who want to try to be entrepreneurs. Good news, bad news. The bad news, believe it or not, is that it makes it so easy to start a company. I mean, in the olden days, myself being the exception, not the rule, you had to make a serious commitment, if you were going to just get off the fast track and start a company. Here it's just so much smoother, easier, softer to start up a company. And so we see in Silicon Valley, you have all of these, people who they don't have anything better to do, and so they jump into a co-working space and figure out, I'm going to start a company. We call them entrepreneurs, God bless them. I think, some cases good things will happen. And in any case, it should be a useful education, but it does crowd up the environment. So we're looking for that entrepreneur that will really just stand out from the crowd, and that's an increasingly a challenge in the sense that there's so many in the crowd. It's just that much harder to stand out, and so that's my biggest advice to entrepreneurs here and everywhere. Is you got to figure out what you've got that really makes you stand out.
Yeah, I saw that you have written about that as the wow moment, and is that part of what you're doing here in New Zealand? And how can people come along and talk to you or listen or be part of what you're up to here? Yeah.
So what I encourage entrepreneurs is, for the most part, ignore what all the pitch coaches are telling you. That most of the pitch coaching is not really pitch coaching, it's presentation coaching. And rarely do you have a chance to present. So yes, there are pitch days, which are presentations, but there you are amongst, again, all the crowd, and it's hard to stand out. Pitching is all about encapsulating the essence of your compelling value proposition. And most entrepreneurs, they're so wrapped up in their product. Whenever they approach me, mainly what they do is they like to talk about their product. And what I want to know is, what is it about their product that delivers extraordinary value to their customers, that makes their customers fall in love, that changes the life of their customers such that they can't live without that product. That's the value proposition. And it's got to be extraordinarily compelling for you to stand out from the crowd. So that's something you should be able to articulate in like 20 seconds. You don't need, 2 minutes or 6 minutes or 20 minutes to make it clear what your compelling value proposition is. And so one of the things that I point out to entrepreneurs is, if you think about your day, your life, your experience, most of the time you only have 20 seconds to grab someone's attention, whether it's in an email or if it's at a trade show or if it's at a coffee or meetup or whatever it is. You really only have 20 seconds to get permission to get that follow-up meeting or send them your deck or talk even longer. So you really got to figure out how to get them to say, wow, that's really interesting. I want to find out more. Can you send me, or can you come in? How are you going to get the person you're talking to say, wow, that's really interesting? So that's what I try to convey to entrepreneurs, is one of the single most important keys to their communication success.
That's so cool. And what events have you got coming up in the next couple of weeks in Auckland?
So I have a whole bunch of things coming up, but my calendar has been filled. But near term, on the morning of the 25th, I'm running a master class at AUT on the art of scaling up your startup. And that's a whole nother topic, is the difference between a startup and a scale up. And I'm going to be talking about that on the 25th, the morning of the 25th. And then on June 1st, I'm doing a Project 17 keynote that evening on June 1st, talking about 21st century entrepreneurship and how the ecosystem of innovation has shifted over just the last 10 years or so, and talk about how the shifts in the nature of innovation affect entrepreneurs and investors and corporates and policymakers, but with a focus on entrepreneurs. And then in between, I'm going to do some brown bag lunches and I'm going to do a Facebook Live event, and I'm going to meet with some entrepreneurs, and I'm going to go down to the grid and do a Biz Dojo thing. And what else am I? I'm doing a lot of things. So,
get involved. Well, thank you so much for coming to chat to us, Bill Reichert. It's been a real pleasure.
My great pleasure. And to all entrepreneurs out there, kia kaha. And may the force be with you. So.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you very much to Madeline Chapman for producing, and thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound. And brought to you by The Spin-Off and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spin-Off Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.